Join our Patreon.
Do you really want to know? We are Mythvision.
Dr. Price, we have a question from Rob Brockway. He sent about Nietzsche and Jefferson. He says, I love your podcast very much. Keep up the excellent work. I'm not sure if this is the best way to ask a question. mythvisionpodcast@gmail.com. All right. This is the question I had with Dr. Price in mind, but I'm curious what all of you think on this topic. Like Dr. Price, I very much enjoy the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. Obviously, Nietzsche was no fan of Christianity, but did have some admiration for the character of Christ. He believed that Paul, Peter, and others distorted the actual teachings of Jesus, thereby transforming Christianity into a religion for slaves. So here's my question. Do you think the underlying teachings of Jesus that Nietzsche did admire in any way correlate with Thomas Jefferson's The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth, the so-called Jefferson Bible? Thank you in advance for your time. It's very much appreciated. Best regards, Rob.
Well, I don't even remember if I've read the Jefferson Bible. I may have, but it would be so long. By the way, Jefferson was a fellow of the Jesus Seminar before it existed, because they would always, in their debates about whether Jesus really said or did something in the Gospels, they would count Jefferson's opinion as one of the votes. I love that. And I really am fond of the Jesus Seminar in the years I was involved with it, a great bunch of people. I don't know, like, as I understand it, Jefferson cut out the miraculous and supernatural stuff and saw Jesus as a great teacher, but I'd be surprised if he rejected turn the other cheek and all of that kind of thing. And but to switch over to Nietzsche, I think he really makes the case for the slave morality and mentality that have overtaken Jesus. He saw Jesus, I think he said at one point that the only real Christian died on the cross. And he must have seen Jesus as the Superman. And which is interesting. When the Superman arrives on the scene, Nietzsche said he will be the Antichrist because he will overturn Christianity for something better. The transvaluation of values, and all of the squeamish little Christians will oppose him and try to stop him because they want to evade responsibility for what they've done and for what they could do but do not, as Feuerbach said. The burden of your own potential greatness is too great to bear. So you say, well, I can do nothing. Like Jesus says, without me you can do nothing in the Gospel of John. And that does seem to me to be the slave morality. Did Jesus say that or not? Who the heck knows? But the best example of a gospel passage that sums up what Nietzsche is saying is when he says, whoever in this adulterous and sinful generation is ashamed of me and my words, of him will the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes. And so forth. Nietzsche, I believe Nietzsche used this as an example. In other words, you're not striking back. You're saying, you're going to be in trouble when I tell my big brother about this. You're claiming to turn the other cheek and be forgiving, but you're just drooling for the day the Son of Man comes and wipes the smirk off of these jerks' faces. It's like, well, I'll forgive you, but God won't. That's just a classic example of the cowardly slave mentality. If you, or you may just resent them. And that's rather than trying to get back at them or succeed as they did, you want to denigrate their success and within the vault of your own emotions, you're just resenting them. Nietzsche called it ressentiment. Not quite the same thing as resentment, but this is why any country the United States helps turns around and hates the United States. They envy our prosperity and power, and they're not going to do anything to emulate it. They're just going to resent it and try to bring us down. That's just the slave mentality. This therapeutic culture where you're not responsible for anything. It was your upbringing and your place in society. You're the victim. So rather, like a great example is the black leaders that say, if you're black and trying to succeed, being a student, an energetic worker, and of course there are plenty that are, but the ones that say, oh no, victimology, that's us, they're just internalizing the racism of white racists. And they say, oh, you're acting white if you study. Like, what? You are out of your mind. You're internalizing this mentality of oppression. You've got to see through that. Stop repeating Ku Klux Klan propaganda and internalizing it as the truth. The hell with that. Succeed. If you say that's acting white, you're the white racist. You're the one that's saying, well, the real blacks fail. Real blacks are victims. Good God, what is the matter? That's self-directed racism, and that's Nietzscheanism, or the nanny state business. You just sit back and we'll tell you when to open your business again, and we'll tell you all these things to do, and nanny, what's the guy's name? Bloomberg says you can't buy a 16-ounce Coke. You let us decide. Look, it's their business if they want to do that. But no, I can't trust you. I'll make the decisions for you. This paternalistic fascism, I did a column once called Nietzsche and the Nanny State. This is like, why are you concerned to excuse criminals and let them go and all of that? Because if I say they're not really guilty, what else could they have done? That means I'm not guilty of anything. Nobody's guilty of anything, so I don't have to take responsibility either. It's worth saying you're not responsible if I can then say I'm not responsible. And I think that is what lurks behind this turn the other cheek stuff. Now, there are better motives for coming out with a turn the other cheek, like Nietzsche himself. The Superman is like a bodhisattva. He is so far above the pesky little flies that try to sting him that it's like they know not what they do. Are you going to get mad at an ant that bites you? I mean, you might crush it, though I wouldn't, have to admit. But the ant's not attacking and insulting you. If you took offense, that damn mosquito, how dare, you're crazy. That's absurd. And so to think that God is upset at what puny little mortals do, come off it. You're not that important. But if you're the Superman, the one that creates values and will not just accept the herd mentality or the slave mentality, because it's very similar to Heidegger also. We live our lives under the dictates of Das Mann, that is John Q. Public, what the mass thinks, and rather than saying, hey, look, I'm going to be dead pretty soon now, even if I live another 60 years, I must decide what my life is going to mean, because I am the only one who can decide it. I can't. Harvey Cox wrote this great book called On Not Leaving It to the Snake. The way he interpreted the Garden of Eden is that Adam and Eve, he knew it was a myth, but he's saying what the myth is about is acquiescence, that they let the snake tell them what to do, and they got into big trouble. Well, that's what happens with us too. Oh, you think this is okay? It's so, yeah, I think that there is there really is the sick room religion aspect to Christianity. I think another way to look at this is there is a kind of terminal disease of hyper morality that liberalism gets into. Like, I hate to say it, but vegetarianism. Like, I know how the PETA people feel. If I'm having a hamburger, I'm now more conscious than ever that we killed this innocent animal so I could eat this. But like Charles Krauthammer said, I'm just too old to change my ways, but the future generation may stop eating meat, killing animals. But I have to say that this is a kind of reverse moral decadence. Pacifism is too. You know, it really wouldn't be, it isn't good to lock people up in jail, so let's let them out. It isn't good to kill enemy soldiers, so let's just let them kill us and we'll be martyrs. This is morality, but it's too moral. It's a cancerous growth of morality that is self-defeating. And the whole politically correct thing is insane hyper-morality. And that's, I think, kind of what he's talking about. That all ultimately is the slave mentality. Nobody's guilty, and so luckily I'm not guilty either. And a great book on this is by a Protestant philosopher called Ressentiment, and it's, what's the guy's name? It's, oh boy, what's his name? Max Shaler. He was one of the great sociologists of knowledge, so-called. And he wrote a book on Ressentiment where he shows that there is a Christian way to embrace what Nietzsche talks about, and convincingly, I think, that you can, the key being, if you're above the mass, the mob, the pew potatoes, you're in no way indebted to them, though because of your exalted status, you must look down at them in true condescension, that of the bodhisattva. You don't scorn those who are beneath you. You have compassion to help them, and you don't expect not to be crucified. That could happen, but you can't be dragged down. And Jesus was dragged down by those who feared his morality. One last thing on this. I think Nietzsche's Christ is also that of Dostoevsky in the Brothers Karamazov, in the section, the Grand Inquisitor parable. Oh, I love this, where he says, imagine Jesus shows up, I think at the 16th century during the Inquisition, whatever the heck that was. And he's in rural Spain, and he goes around preaching and healing, just like in the Gospels, and people are flocking to him, and the Catholic Church gets wind of this. And so the Grand Inquisitor has his thugs arrest Jesus and drag him into jail. He says, okay, tomorrow you're going to be burned at the stake as a heretic. And you want to know why? Well, because we have spent all these centuries trying to undo the mischief you unleashed. People want to be told what to do. But here you are telling people to bear the cross of freedom and self-determination. They don't want that. You're just tormenting them with that, and we're not going to let, and we finally managed to get rid of that. We're not going to let you start it up again. So tomorrow morning, get out the marshmallows. You're going to be burned at the stake. But then the Inquisitor thinks back, I used to think you were right. And I have to admit, I have a soft spot in my heart here. Why don't you get out of here? Just get out of town. And so he escapes being executed again. But holy mackerel, that is the Nietzschean Jesus. And Jesus never says a thing in this thing. You're just hearing the Inquisitor. And boy, is that Nietzschean. One of the first sermons I did at First Baptist of Montclair was called Miracle, Mystery, and Authority, which was based on this, that how does the religious establishment gull you into accepting whatever they say? Well, they say, okay, I can do this miracle, and that will show that what I say is true. Well, it was Voltaire who already said, if I hold up a ball and say, I'm going to prove that 2 + 2 = 5 by making this ball disappear, and by some sleight of hand I make it disappear, or let's say I really do make it disappear, does that prove that 2 + 2 = 5? No. It's amazing what you did. That has nothing to do with that. And in the same way, they pull a fast one. Oh, we've got these miracles we can prove, so you'd better believe that the Bible is inspired and that we, its interpreters, are authoritative. So there's authority. Now we're sort of hornswoggling you, bamboozling you into accepting anything we say. Well, he did make that ball disappear.
I think it's interesting what you just said there. I was watching a lecture done by the amazing Randy, and the atheist, you were just doing your atheist lecture toward mentioning him often, that's anti-philosophy. Dawkins. Yeah, Richard Dawkins and him were talking, and he says, look, and I'd be careful if I were you, Randy. And he says, why? Because he has his foundation, right? And his whole entire foundation is really trying to find people who claim they have these supernatural gifts to know the future, to know things they shouldn't, with some type of sense that's beyond the 5 that we currently know with fact. To prove, that these guys are who they say they are or what they say they are. Well, that being said, he says, I'd be careful, because who knows if at some point there may be someone who can do something we scientifically have not been capable of yet knowing, and you shoot yourself in the foot and have to hand over $1 million because there's something that they figured out about us as humans, scientifically, that we evolved and figured something out, and here you go thinking, well, it's either you can do these things or someone finds a way to do these things, because who knows how they figure it out. They find out how to unlock something. But you equate that with something beyond as a supernatural thing that's beyond our scope of understanding at the time, and we might understand it at some point. So he's like, I'd be careful scientifically. We might figure out how to do something that you're claiming is supernatural scientifically down the road, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because with what you're saying and suggesting here, when people want to prove God or prove the Jesus or prove the Bible, all I got to do is pull another possible, look, I turned water into wine. Well, what if that story, and I'm just saying, if the story was a historical or has some historical relevance, it was known in the ancient world there were 2 compartments in some of these jugs. So to pour out water and then pour out wine, you have to know how ancient shenanigans worked. And today we might have a way that, I'm not going to say it could be ancient or shenanigans, so to speak, but it might be something that we figure out, and then you think that it must be supernatural, and there's a natural way of figuring out how to tap into something that we haven't been able to at some point as humans. So I thought that's interesting.
I'm really pleased to hear that Dawkins said that.
Yeah, he was open-minded to saying that. And James Randi came out, was like, nah, still, until I see it, I'm not going to,
Oh, well, that's true, too.
Right.
You don't want to be bamboozled either. But the interesting, an interesting implication of this is that I think the line between natural and supernatural is very faded and perhaps erased if you simply ask, how would God do a supernatural feat that we couldn't do? Thales, the first philosopher supposedly and the first scientist, he said, Zeus causes it to rain, okay, but how does he do it? And he believed, he also said all things are full of gods. He was no, naturalistic humanist and all that. But yeah, how does he do it? Does God, like the Quran says, he saith unto a thing, be, and it is. Well, how does that work? Even if that's true, there must be some way in which it happens. Does Zeus seed the cloud in some way? I mean, is there some way in which the vibrations of his voice? I don't know,
right.
But there must be some way in which it happens. Otherwise, we're just talking about cartoons. And if that is the case, then that means that when Jesus changed water into wine, how did he do it? There must have been a way in which he did it. So it seems to me there's no real difference. It's just we don't yet understand it, and it may be so above us and so recondite we never will.
See, I'm with you. I think you would agree with me being skeptical on these stories even being legit. Though in the ancient world, many people claim that many people were doing these things. And what people call magic were probably sleight of hand situations, or if not sleight of hand, probably things that people don't understand. How did he know the full moon? How did he know that the eclipse was on this day at this hour? Well, a little bit of mathematics will help you out if you know your calendar. And we found devices showing the Greeks knew when and how. There's some interesting stuff on knowing when and how these celestial bodies would happen, and that gives you a one-up when you can predict an unbelievable sight that the whole world witnesses. You're the guy, What gets me about James Randi, I just wanted to close out on this, and I think it's interesting, is how he came to be what he was. He wanted to know the how, and he was able to send in and infiltrate. They had scientific inquiry trying to figure out these supposed guys, and I think he had a chip on his shoulder, but rightfully, I think. His chip on his shoulder was a good one because he could reenact all the things the guys who claimed they really could do these things. He could do them and say, I just tricked you. Whereas you think this guy really did it. I'm telling you, he's a trick. And I love that about him, because these other guys getting all your money and tricking you, you think they're really gurus that know something you don't. I'm telling you how to do it. I'm really good at what I do. He is too. He's just BSing you, pretty much. That I have a lot of respect for that, and that's why he has the $1 million thing. And Dawkins is right. Be careful, what if something happens? If someone does what you did, knowing far more at some point, and they come into your freaking foundation, and they make it through your little tests, and here you are going, well, he went through it twice, he did everything, and we said, here's the stipulations, and they passed it. Dang it, we got to pay him $1 million now, but I want to know how you did it. That should be the goal.
I think Randi would say, I'm not paying you because you must have done some sort of a trick. And then, of course, he'd be taken to court, and who knows what the judgment would be. But I think, you've got to assume it's a trick in order to research that possibility, and it almost always is. We know of ancients that did pull stunts like that. I think we know how the priests of Dionysus seemingly changed water into wine. And in the book of Revelation, where the false prophet causes the statue of the beast to speak, that was ventriloquism, and they knew it at the time, to the point where you have to wonder if the author expects you to know it. He said, look, this guy's just a trickster. Who knows, but it wouldn't be surprising. Okay, there were interesting books written about the revival in Indonesia in the 1970s, where apparently apostolic miracles were going on, including changing water into wine. Well, this guy from Dallas Seminary, and they don't believe miracles happen anymore, so they're oddly skeptical. This is George Stevens, I think. He went there and interviewed a whole lot of people, and what he found was that the people didn't really draw a line here, and that they knew that when they changed water into wine, they had sprinkled some stuff into a vat of water to make it taste like wine. This is just how you do the miracle. Or that when they said somebody was raised from the dead, by dead, they didn't necessarily mean you were totally gone. Just like we, brain dead, is that totally? And that, so that you have to wonder, well, so even if you knew that it wasn't strictly miraculous, there's a kind of a ritual symbolism. Up at the Center for Inquiry, we had somebody demonstrate these feats scientifically, like he plunged his hand into boiling lead and pulled it out, no problem, because there's a
layer
of air, and if you left it in there, that'd be another problem. And similarly, they covered some yards of grass with hot coals and had them smoldering for hours. And then at a certain point, they said we could all walk on the hot coals. And so I did, and it was like just beach sand. I didn't get a blister out of it, it didn't hurt, and yet it was mind-blowing. I knew that it was all a trick, though admittedly, but I figured I just walked across hot coals. Yeah. It didn't matter. It was somehow the ritual of the symbolism that did it, and so who knows what the ancients were thinking.
My buddy, he's a magician, and he actually does the research, like mentalism and all that. He gets into the real deeps of it and how it correlates to the human mind and why religion, like he gets into how it connects and realizes how seriously important this is to the aspect of convincing people. If there wasn't any of this stuff, there's no certainty that you'd see, well, what's the point of mine being superior? You have to have some reason. And he said he went into a hospital and there was a woman there and he did a trick on her. He pretty much tells her, he creates an initial conversation with her somehow to start, and he's like, what's your name? Oh, really? And like creates the dialogue, and what's your birthday? And oh, wow. Pick a card or, whatever it might be. And he's like, you know what's weird? 3 days ago, I was by myself thinking about who I would be able to bless with this. And for some reason, I knew that it was you. And he pulled, like some stunt where he pulled up a picture on his phone. And there he is with her name, her everything, like on the image, shows it to her. And she's blown away and realizes he is connected to something far bigger than me, and that this was God sending her a message, or something crazy. And of course he's an atheist, but he doesn't tell her the secret. He walked away and he said, I'll tell you this, it wasn't for money, even though people swindle people out of money. He said, I'll tell you, that week probably was one of the better weeks she's had in quite a long time, even though I tricked her. He said she felt hope and something beyond in that moment of that trick that I gave her, but people use it to screw people over. He says, not me. I could tell her, but then it would take away the effect of what just inspired her for that day and possibly that week, and who knows how long the effect had on her. But it made her feel almost like you walked on the coals, like what just happened, I can't believe it, except way more personal and emotional, that she felt like I'm special. I'm important. Something cares about me beyond me. So, thanks, Dr. Bob. Join our Patreon